So, welcome everybody to the Finnish Permaculture Association lecture series called PermaPuheet and Ihan Pihalla. Today, we're going to have with us Wilf, which is part of a co-op named Abundant Earth, and he will discuss about how to create, run, manage, and depending on questions that you will have, maybe the subject will go with that. I just want to remind that every question is welcome, as well as we will ask you to wishfully fill up the feedback at the end of this lecture, which we will link in the chat. I am your host, Alexi, tonight. And without further ado, I will let Wilf Richard start. Welcome, Wilf.
Right. Great. Thanks for having me. Great to be here, and great to make another connection with Finland. I'm close to being tempted to actually physically come to your country. Actually, I feel like the connections building. Having been involved with Dominic's diploma last year, so I got quite an insight, at least into Dominic's work, and also a little touch maybe of some of the kind of Finnish culture. So yeah, this evening, depending on whether you're here or there, maybe, I'm going to talk about co-ops, and in particular my own experience of being in a co-op. So I'll start with that, and I thought I'd also explain a little bit about how, seeing as this is a permaculture community, a little bit about how permaculture principles and ethics in particular fit in with the kind of cooperative approach. And so I'll kind of bring up a kind of few principles and ethics and explain how I think they're relevant as well. So I suppose there's kind of like two halves. It might be more sections than that. And I'll kind of give you the opportunity to ask questions every now and again after I've kind of rambled on a bit for a while. A little bit of history about myself to begin with. I live in northeast England, at just outside of Durham, which is a little bit south of Newcastle, where I went to university in the early 90s. And whilst at university, I learned about permaculture, but also I came up with a bit of a plan, which was not uncommon amongst people interested in permaculture, and still isn't uncommon now, which is the classic dream of let's get a bit of land and work it and live on it and make things and grow things and possibly make an income out of that. And inevitably, one of those very first choices in that vision is, shall I do it with somebody or not? Should I do this just myself and a partner, just a kind of small family unit, or maybe with other families, or with lots of people? And I was very inspired in the 90s by a group called Radical Roots, who still exists. I'm not so sure they have connections with Finland. They're certainly well known here amongst the cooperative movement in England. Effectively, Radical Roots is a co-op of co-ops. We're not particularly involved with them. Occasional kind of overlapping. I do a very clear image though that comes to my mind very early on, reading one of their leaflets, and it had this lovely two lovely images. One was a big fish chasing a little fish, and the little fish was all kind of scared and having to hide and run away. And then the little fish joined up with lots and lots of other little fish and collectively became a bigger fish than the big fish, and then proceeded to chase the big fish away. So that was like, and basically it was like, this is the power of co-ops. And then another little cartoon they had, which was about moving a boulder. This was like a really, really big rock. And this person was trying to move the rock on their own. And obviously they couldn't do it. And then kind of three of their friends kind of came along and they helped move the rock together. So it's just very simple demonstration of like, let's work together, we can get more done, we might actually get something done even. And I also remember another cartoon image from the Quakers as well, which probably dates back to the 70s or 80s, and it was about two donkeys tied together by a rope. I'm not so sure they use this imagery anymore. Probably people wouldn't like it. Anyway, it's only a cartoon. The two donkeys were tied together by a rope and were both trying to get to some food that was equidistanced away. And they were both pulling against each other, and consequently neither of the donkeys could get to the food. And then of course they cooperated, and both the donkeys went together to one pile of food and ate that together, and then turned around and went to the other pile of food and ate that together. So another little kind of visual demonstration of the power of co-ops. And so I found these cartoon images, these leaflets, which are pretty rare these days, kind of got circulated around the protests and alternative green permaculture movements in the 90s, very influential on my thinking. And so the idea of, this vision of buy land, work land, live on the land, for me, it was like, this has to be done as a co-op. I need to find other people like-minded enough that and tolerable enough of me, and hopefully I can be tolerable enough of them, that we can do this together. And so that seed was born in about 95, 96. And I set about trying to find those other people. And to begin with, I searched amongst various very few the permaculture network was very small in the UK in the 90s and wasn't particularly joined up. So. And I personally was very connected with the road protest movement at that point in time, and so saw a lot of connections through that. And we very quickly kind of formed a network of about 30, 40 people or so, with the intention of just buying a massive piece of land somehow, and living and working together on it. And over the next kind of 3-4 years, that evolved and changed enormously, because although you have this intention to cooperate with each other, actually you kind of start to explore the details of your vision and start to find differences, and that then becomes quite hard. Some things you can resolve and some things just are not resolvable. The classic was who wants to stay here in the northeast of England, who wants to be somewhere else. Instantly that's like the group split into two. Who wants to make it very vegan, plant-based only, very inspired by, say, Plants for Future project, which was big at the time, and who wants to allow animals in there. So again, that's kind of like a split that's very hard to negotiate and find a compromise around. So I ended up staying with the group that was like, want to be here in the northeast, want to have some flexibility about plants and animals, want to have a mix of land as well, so some pasture, some woodland, ideally near a city. So that's another kind of classic split when you're looking for a bit of land, is rural or urban or a little bit suburban. So we decided we wanted to be close to a city, but yeah, on the edge of the city. Edge, of course, being very important in terms of permaculture, and that was really important for myself. I wanted to have access to markets and education, allow people to have access to us very easily as well, volunteering, that just exchange of energy. As part of the cooperative thing, I wanted to cooperate with the community around, as well as the people I was working the land with as well. So, long story short, going from a very large group actually down to a very small one. And it ended up being 5 of us who ended up buying a piece of land together. And we established a legal structure to buy that land. That legal structure was called the Land of Roots. It still is called the Land of Roots. And that was a type of co-op when we first established that. It's a type of co-op where individuals can be a member of it, but also other co-ops could be a member of it as well. So it's sometimes referred to as a secondary co-op. It's kind of like in terms of permaculture principles, like from pattern to details, we're talking like at pattern level, basically. So we established that co-op to begin with, and we were still in these early days of buying our land, which was just 2 miles from the edge of Durham City. We were all self-employed as gardeners, landscape work, community work, some craft activity, some educational activity, kind of mix of eco, green, some school work, various things. So we carried on in that kind of way of being self-employed and having our own individual incomes for the first 3 or 4 years of owning the land. And the first 3 or 4 years of owning a bit of land, you kind of don't do that much, really. A lot of observation, a lot of just like fixing fences, a lot of just working out what's what, getting to know some of the locals a bit better. We put some fences up. We inherited some animals. We decided to get rid of some animals, bring some different sheep in. We started looking after the trees, planting a few more trees. It's kind of like mainly kind of voluntary type activities on the land in the first 3 or 4 years, just kind of feeling our way, really. And we had these really nice kind of communal work days. We would still carrying on our self-employed work in the town, city, local villages for maybe 3 days a week, and then maybe do about 2 days a week working together, sometimes 3 days a week working together on this small holding, which I should say is about 15 acres. I'm not too sure if you use acres or hectares in Finland. So about 6 hectares, 15 acres. So it's kind of, a big enough size, and it's about half pasture and about half woodland. Nice river, old railway line on one of the boundaries, so really good transport. About 500 yards from a little road leading onto a big road, very close to the main train line between Edinburgh and London, so really good access actually. And at the same time, this lovely rural feeling, but actually less than an hour we could walk into Durham City as well. Really landed on our feet there. I mean, really lucky. One of the things we did in a kind of cooperative way to enable us to buy the land was actually make this commitment to put £10 a week each into a special bank account that could only be used for buying land, with the understanding that if we didn't succeed in buying the land, then we would just get that money back. So it kind of became like a piggy bank, if you use that phrase in Finland. A savings bank basically for each of us, but collective, so it was with Triodos Bank, the ethical bank, and we asked other people to put bits of money in as well, again with the understanding that you can either just give it to us or we'll give it back to you at some point in the future if we don't buy land, or if we do buy the land, then maybe we would arrange a loan with you and we would then pay the money back to you in over a period of time. And that's what we ended up doing. So it was kind of one of our very first acts of working as a co-op together. And and solving little problems like that was beautiful. You know, it was worked a treat, really did. And yeah, we established a kind of financial system to buy the land, based on putting these £10 a week into that bank account. So we kind of knew that we would have, you know, £20,000 in there in, say, 10 years' time from that. And so we could take on £20,000 worth of loans very comfortably, no banks involved. So yeah, it felt like a very cooperative thing to do, very empowering, and yeah, enabled us to buy the bit of land. So the other kind of key point on our journey becoming a co-op was about 3-4 years after buying the land. We're still self-employed, but starting to grow vegetables on the land, and then we started a veg block scheme. So packing veg bags, distributing those bags of vegetables to the community. Very small scale to begin with. It just was a stepping stone to our economics, our finances are starting to merge, they're starting to join up, and wondering, do we need to have another way, another financial model that enables us to cooperate together at another level, and pool our economic resources together. And at the same time, we were looking at, well, if one of us goes off site to do, say, some permaculture consultancy or work in a school doing some craft activity, that individual might get paid £200-300 a day. Whereas somebody chooses to spend a day planting trees on the land or managing a hedgerow, then that's voluntary. You would not get any income from it. So how do we balance that out? And also by this point in time, we were 2 families. The 5th person had left. They decided they wanted to be an engineer, and go off and do something else. So we very much became just the 2 families. So myself and my partner, Beth, and the other couple, Matt and Joe. And we each had a child, each at this point in time. My first son was born year 2000, and Matt and Joe's son was born in 2001. And we bought the land at the end of 2001. So, you know, very young families with very small baby children when we first bought the land. Another reason why we didn't do very much in those first 3 or 4 years, with very much being parents. Yeah, so we had this issue though, where, okay, so one week I'm coming home with £1,000. Matt's just worked on the hedgerows all week, hasn't earned any money at all. Next week, Joe has gone off to school or done a landscape contract and brought home £1,000. It's kind of like that. Sometimes it worked as a family, sometimes it didn't. And so we decided we really needed to join our economics up and solve a boom and bust cycle, because one of the patterns of being self-employed, most self-employed people experience this as a boom and bust cycle. In a sense, you'll have a period of time where you have a lot of work, and in that time we have a lot of work, actually you might be quite poor because you might not be being paid at that point in time. You might have a lot of money going out to cover overheads and costs, and then maybe you just get lots of money in, invoices get paid, and then suddenly you've got no work. And then you're kind of rich, but you're kind of like, I don't know where the next bit of work's coming from. So your money just kind of goes up and down. And all 4 of us were experiencing this. We'd have seasonal booms, seasonal times of droughts, and so the obvious idea for us was to form a co-op, a different type of co-op this time, and that's when Abundant Earth was formed. So Abundant Earth sits sort of on top of the Land of Roots. The Land of Roots still exists, it still owns the land, doesn't do any trading, just handles the responsibility of land ownership, land management, hedgerows, tree planting, fences, boundaries, that kind of issue. whereas Abundant Earth deals with all of our trading. So whether I'm doing permaculture, this talk here, whether Matt is doing blacksmithing, or Joe is running a yoga class, or teaching somebody how to make a willow basket, or the veg box scheme, or yeah, and the list goes on. If you have a look at our website, you'll see at least kind of 7 or 8 different income streams there. We actually have closer to about 15. Each of us is responsible for about 3 or 4 different income streams. So this is we're a workers co-op, which is a technical type of co-op. It kind of basically means that we all have equal shares in the company. We all own the company. We're all directors of the company. We're all employers. We're all employees. We're everything. We have every hat on, basically. So we can completely and utterly control what money we spend and how we spend it. And maybe that's quite a good time for me to allow some questions to be asked, because I feel like I've kind of laid a foundation there and explained the kind of basis of kind of how we got to sort of where we are. Yeah, maybe Alexis, you want to kind of see if there's any questions, and we'll maybe do kind of 2 or 3 and see kind of what happens.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if anyone has a question, please use the raise hand remote if you don't mind. I do have a question myself to start. So, like, when you bought the premises, I mean, it was including infrastructure and some other things that you might have needed to renovate, or it was completely barren? What was it for you, the process to actually start to move there? Was it an easy process, or?
No, that's another long story. Basically, there was just about half the land was woodland and the other half was pasture with sheep. And there was one little building that was just a shelter for the sheep. That was the only building that was there when we arrived. When we first moved onto the land, we just moved into tents. And then we built a yurt and a geodome. This was maybe about 3 years after buying the land. One family lived in a yurt, the other family lived in the geodome. That went on for 5 years. And then we built a straw bale house, and then we built another straw bale house. So that's very long story cut short. So very, very long process of kind of doing that, you know. Both the houses we live in, and one for each family. There's a couple of caravans now as well, and another little structure. Two other little structures. Actually, there's another yurt as well now. Yeah, we've built a lot of things here over the years, and we've been here 20 years now. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Yes, Dominic, I can see you have the emote showing.
Yes.
You can.
What was really challenging in the beginning?
Oh, great question. I think there's a number of things come to my mind. So skills, definitely a big one about skills. You know, we all had experience around gardens, community projects, community gardens, landscaping, but you jump up from somebody's back garden to like 15 acres. Yeah, so the scale of it and the skills required for that scale, that was very new to us. We made a lot of errors around, we put a fence here, we'll start to put the fence there, and then 2 years later we got that fence in the wrong place, didn't we? We'll have to move it again. There are a couple of fences actually that we got right first time. Some we definitely moved around. I talked about the money side of thing, and so that wasn't a challenge for us at all. We had a really clear plan, and we implemented that, and that went really well. So that was great. And I suppose the other key challenge was inevitably communication. So how do we kind of maintain that nature of cooperation amongst us? We all individually, have our own particular style of communicating, and we have had plenty of arguments over the last 25 years that we've known each other. And we've always found a way to resolve those conflicts. And we've made a massive effort to resolve those conflicts as well. You know, we've stepped towards those dark places and maintained that dialogue and worked out the differences. And yeah, that's evidence as to why we're still here now. Yeah, we've learned a lot of skills around that over the years, and still learning, because it's a very dynamic situation. You know, it's we as individuals, we change, the dynamics change, relationships change, you know, the situation changes. Yeah, still learning about that. Yeah, which is, yeah, quite exciting. So
yeah, it does sound really, really exciting indeed. Yes, Erkki, you have a question.
Hi, Erkki here. Hi. About the money side. So when you decided to create the second, what's it called, corporation? Were you earning roughly the same money, and were you needing roughly the same money, or how did you arrange that side, which one might imagine is a challenge? But,
no, that's a great question, and definitely one of the things I was going to talk about in some detail. So let me do that, definitely. Yeah, well, a lot of co-ops, I think, still have a fairly traditional format when it comes to paying their workers. So if you do, you know, say it's a cafe, a restaurant, or a whole food store, it's very common to have those as co-ops. If one worker does 10 hours work a week and another worker does 20 hours work a week, then they would get paid, you know, accordingly. That person has been paid for 10 hours of their work, and that person's been paid for 20 hours of their work. We took quite a radical, unusual step around that, in the sense that we decided that no matter what you were doing, we would regard it as work, whether that was research or cooking for the community or childcare, or whether you were working off-site, because we still work off-site now, we still did in those early days, or whether you were working on-site. So, and like I said earlier, somebody could work off-site and bring £300 in the day, and somebody else could work on-site working in a hedgerow and would be earning no money at all. So we took the viewpoint that no matter what effort you were making, we would regard it as equal hours and equal pay. So to begin with, that was incredibly small amount of money, because we did have to let go of quite a lot of work that was off-site, because we wanted to make a bit of an effort of building the business up on-site, so grow more vegetables. So the first 2-3 years, we literally only paid ourselves about £25 each a week. I mean, it's minuscule. I mean, it's just that there's very, very small amount of money. But at the same time, we had as much food as, you know, we survived. Basically, we had enough to live on, and we had some government support, in the sense that there's the benefit in this country called working tax credit, and child benefit. So we were able to access some benefits from the government at the same time as working. So they kind of basically say, okay, if you're earning below this amount per year, then we'll give you that amount. And so we could survive that way. We still pay ourselves an equal amount of money per week. it's gone up to 100, an amazing amount of about £150 a week each. So it's still very, very small amount of money compared to your average wage. So the average wage in this country would be more like £400 or £500 a week, you know, and we're paying ourselves 150. So we're way below that average wage. But we survive and thrive. And that was coming back to that thing about this decision about equal wage. We felt like it was a really important aspect of that equality and fair shares. So fair shares ethic was really important there. I mean, why should somebody who commits to the childcare not get paid the same amount as somebody who commits to going to work in a school and bringing in £300 a day? It's like, well, actually, both these things need to happen. And so there's choices there to make. And we felt like that was the right thing to do. And that I think that really helped with our cooperation. It removed that inequality, that lack of fairness between the individuals, between the four of us. I think it helped to create bonds, community feeling between us, and a recognition that whether that work is paid or unpaid, it's still work. Yeah. So this is sometimes called an income sharing system. It's pretty rare. What we do is pretty rare. We still do it now, maybe about every 5 years. Over the last 15 years that Abundant Earth has existed, we've kind of questioned it. We've kind of gone, we're still doing the right thing. We'll still be doing income sharing. We have a chat about it and think about it and go, yeah, still works. Let's carry on. And we've survived like 2 recessions in this country. In fact, we thrived in both of them. Even though we pay ourselves a pittance, it's worked. Yeah.
Great. I mean, it's not like you really need much, and if you have the support and you feed yourself and you're able to maintain this life.
Yeah.
Super. Someone in the chat had a question. I'm going to try to translate it properly. So it's Rosabella Nomad is asking about where did you find similar enrolled and how does it stay together? I think you have answered that before, but if you could maybe just remind, like, if I remember right, you reached out on groups and then you ended up meeting and then you ended up discussing about who wanted what. And well, if you could just remind us a bit like the process, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long and drawn out process that went on for years and required some determination and persistence. It could easily have broken at various points. And I suppose for some people it did break in the sense that they left. They kind of went, no, I don't want to be in the Northeast, or I want it to be 100% vegan, or and I suppose for some people it was a broken process. It didn't work for them, so it's very hard to find compromise for all of the issues. Inevitably, if somebody wants to live in Portugal, it's like, I don't want to live in Portugal. I don't speak the language. It's very hot. I have family connections with the Northeast of England. I wanted to stay here. So yeah, it basically, it did involve going around in circles a lot. It did involve us, meeting sometimes once a month, sometimes every week. It involved a lot of conflict resolution, a lot of discussion, and until this whittling process. Do you know whittling?
I do.
Yeah, just kind of like you inevitably, I ended up staying with the group of people who wanted to stay with me, and we had the same vision. at times we tried to keep everybody together, whether we were on the same page or not. But actually, there's just some points just went, do you know, this, we just have to acknowledge that's just not going to work. And, you know, one of those moments in time was making that commitment to put £10 a week each into the bank account. And there was maybe 8 people in the group at that point in time. And, you know, one person immediately just went, no, I'm not doing that. And everybody else was just like, well, this is a great plan. Why would you not do this? And he was like, do you know what, actually, I've been thinking about it, and actually my vision's a bit different. Actually, I do want to do something else. I can't remember where he wanted to move. He kind of went, I do want to move down south. You know, so actually by forcing these kind of commitments, inevitably a vision, a dream doesn't happen on its own. You have to ground it. You have to take action, and you have to make decisions. And sometimes you realize that some people are not willing to go along with you on that decision. And that's, yeah, I have one friend who has some regrets about saying no at that point in time. Still love him to bits, you know. He's gone off to do other things, and we see him maybe once a year. And he's now like, I really want to find a bit of land, you know. And it's like, well, and now he's 50. You know, it's hard to start doing that physical work when you're in your 50s. Yeah. Yes, that maybe
That's
answered
pretty
the question.
good. Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, it's also somehow like you do have to put efforts to get to know those people and make this sort of commitment, and sort of a little bit take some risks a bit, right? Because if you don't take any risks, sometimes it won't go forward.
Yes,
right?
Yes, yeah. It can't be just the talking about it. It can't be just the vision. There has to be some decisions.
Actions.
Like with any permaculture design, you have to kind of have an implementation plan. And in a co-op, you're agreeing that vision, that you're agreeing that implementation plan. And yeah, it's fair. Obviously, if somebody has an objection to that plan and can come up with a better plan or a tweak to that plan, we all kind of go, brilliant, you've made it even better. But inevitably, if somebody says, actually, do you know what? I'm going to back away. I'm going to wish you well and step back. Then, yeah, that is painful, but that does happen.
If you don't mind, I would still have a question, because you talked about 2 entities on the land, which is the life roots, and then you have abundant earth on top. Really on top, you know, there's this relation. So I'm thinking abundant earth is the co-op, so everybody owns it. But what about life roots? Is it the same concept? Does one of you own the land? Because that's something that I'm kind of struggling as well, trying to understand how this works. So if you have any sorts of
no. So it's the land of roots. It's legally it's a company. In the UK, we have a department of the government called Companies House, and so most co-ops are actually just a type of company. So a particular set of rules that mean that the directors and the employers and the employees are the same people. So the Land of Roots is a type of company and has 4 directors, which is the 4 of us. And Abundant Earth is also a company, but it's a different type of company, but it's still a co-op. It's a different type of co-op as well. I could get into those technical things, but they're probably not relevant to yourselves in Finland. We'll just leave it as they're different types of company, but they're both legal entities. They both have the same directors as the 4 of us are directors of the Land of Roots, and we're directors of Abundant Earth. So they as legal entities, as companies, they have a relationship with each other as well. So Abundant Earth pays a rent to the Land of Roots for hiring the land. At the same time, the Land of Roots pays Abundant Earth for managing the land, because Abundant Earth has the resources and the people and the skills and the tools to plant that hedge, look after the sheep, look after the trees, and the Land of Roots kind of just goes, I'm just going to own the land. I'm not going to do any trading or selling or, you know, providing any products or services. So it contracts Abundant Earth to do that job. So
both entities have their respected roles. They don't. They complement each other without interfering with each other.
Yeah, exactly, and that works really well. Some people try to have just one company that both owns the land and does their trading as well. It can work in some situations. I know other groups that have maybe just one individual who owns the land and then a co-op that works on that land. That can get a bit tricky. Dynamics can be the power issue there. And then I know other groups where maybe it's a charity, so it's a different type of company again, more of a the word charity I'm sure is familiar in Finland. So, you know, maybe a charity owns the land, but it's a co-op or individuals who manage it. So there's lots of variations, lots of models that can be utilized there. And the key thing is to have yourself a set of questions to explore about, you know, how do you want it to operate? How do you want it to run? Who do you want to own this, that, and the other? What powers do you want? And you can go through. There are organisations that support the development of co-ops. The one here in the UK is called Co-ops UK. They have a really good website, and they have lots of resources on there about types of co-ops, about those questions to ask. They have funding available if you want to start up a co-op as well. I imagine that funding's not eligible to people in Finland. Maybe there's a similar organisation in Finland though. I don't know.
I don't know, but that's something to explore at some point, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't something equivalent to Co-ops UK in Finland, that's a really interesting opportunity for somebody. And I'm sure Co-ops UK would support the development of such a thing somehow. I don't know. Yeah, we're a member of Co-ops UK, which is great, really useful. Get access to training and various resources from them, and keeps us connected to the cooperative movement here in the UK. There are thousands of co-ops, and one of the principles of a co-op, co-ops have various principles. One of those principles is that co-ops are encouraged to cooperate with other co-ops as a priority. So if we were to buy something, then our preference should be to buy from another co-op if we can. Not always possible, of course. I was going to talk about some of the permaculture principles in relation to co-ops. One that's really obvious, I'll start with a really obvious one, which is integrate rather than segregate. So David Holmgren principle. I mean, this is just, that says co-ops all over it, really. Obviously, it's commonly used in terms of something like a forest garden or a small holding or land setting where you're trying to integrate your various elements in your design. So, livestock and plants or perennial crops are integrated in some form. but for us, that's an obvious application in terms of a co-op. We are integrated with each other. We have to we meet once a week to sit down and have a formal business meeting. But obviously we have, daily communication as well about little things. We have various processes in place to enable us to resolve conflict, for example, and various systems in place to enable us to make decisions as a group. So yeah, we integrate rather than segregate, an obvious principle. A warning around that, though, is to not integrate too much. You need to respect each other's privacy, as a family, as an individual, respect decisions or respect opinions that maybe can be different at times. So it's that loose integration where communication and energy can be exchanged, but not an enforced integration in the sense of fascism is what comes to my mind, which is the dark side of integration, basically. So the other principle that's obvious that comes to my mind is cooperate rather than compete, one of Bill Mollison's principles. So pretty obvious, kind of, we obviously are trying to, we don't compete with each other internally on site. I kind of question this principle a little bit, though. And it comes back to those images I was describing to you early on, in the sense that actually, as individuals forming a co-op, it kind of means that as a group, we can compete externally with somebody who wants to do something, that maybe we want to compete against. I mean, it's very rare that we would actually compete against anybody. I like to refer to this principle, though, as cooperate and compete. If we observe nature, we see cooperation going on in terms of like mycelium, fungi, plant interactions, and some animal to animal interactions as well. But we also see competition as well, and that can be healthy. It can encourage growth. It can encourage learning. It can be a key part of evolution in terms of, actually, I'd really like to compete with the capitalist system. I'd like to out-compete the capitalist system. I'd like to see the end of that greedy capitalist system. And I think the way to do it is by competing with it and showing that co-ops can be better than it. And this is one of the things that Co-ops UK repeatedly tell us. They do this lovely annual newsletter, annual report, talking about the finances of co-ops in the UK and how there are millions of people in the UK who are members of co-ops, and how collectively the turnover of co-ops in the UK is more than some of the big corporations here. So, cooperate and compete. Just getting a balance between the two, I think, is important, really. So, and I, even on the, I saw a lovely example of a bit of friendly competition between two people who were trying to finish their diploma, permaculture diploma, at the same time. They became partners in the sense of like a buddy system, like they would support each other. So they would kind of cooperate with each other, but they would also kind of go, oh, you've got your 4th design assessed, I've only got my 3rd one, I better catch up with you. And then it got to like 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. They ended up finishing at the same time, doing their presentations together at the same event about 2 years ago now, and it was beautiful to watch. And the 3 of us coined this change to the principle at that event. We said, this is a really good example where we can see the importance of that healthy competition as a balance to that cooperation. Just, encourage each other to kind of like work a little bit harder. So here's another principle: minimum effort for maximum effect. It's written in various ways, this principle. Maximum gain for minimum effort. I've seen it written in various ways. But yeah, so as self-employed individuals, we had 4 tax returns, 4 lots of accounts, 4 sets of communication with the government. Whereas now, as a co-op, 1 set of accounts, and just 1 tax return. So a lot less paperwork, basically. So that collaboration. The other kind of key principle is around resilience, which kind of exists in various forms as a principle in permaculture. I'd quite like to see it kind of coined better rather than just being resilient. But so we, like I mentioned earlier, we've been through 2 recessions, 2 economic crises in this country, as I'm sure they happened in Finland at the same time, and COVID as well. And we've been resilient. And I think one of the reasons we've had that resilience is because we've been a co-op. We've been able to communicate with each other and make a plan and act fairly quickly. But because we're a co-op, we have this income sharing, it's given us a lot of stability, so that if one of those bits of our income dies, then we still have at least 10 other bits of income, money coming in. So lots and lots of inputs. If one of those inputs stops, then we're still okay. So the ability to cope with shocks that resilience principle has been really important for us as a co-op. Maybe I'll throw this out as a question to everybody here. Can you think of some permaculture principles that come to your mind when you think of co-ops? Or maybe somebody else has got another question for me, and I can kind of get a sense that we maybe got about 10 minutes left, haven't we, or something like that?
Yes, so. About like that, exactly. So if anyone has a question or wants to answer the question Wilf said, previously, Wilf, there was someone that asked a question regarding, in your co-op, do you have like a drug and alcohol policy? I know we're coming back to the previous subject, but this question has been asked before. Like, do you have a drugs and alcohol policy? Because here it seems that in some Finnish communities that's an issue.
Right. Okay. We don't have it as a policy. We don't do drugs. I mean, be fair to say that we have all done drugs at some point in the past. I'm not going to deny that. That is pretty common for everybody, isn't it? At some point. Yes, I didn't inhale, apparently. No, that's just rubbish. You probably might not get that joke. Sorry. Yeah, we've not felt the need to have a policy around that. We have had a policy around volunteers, and particularly residential volunteers, to kind of we've had a preference to find people who are non-smoking and yeah, don't drink or don't have a drink issue. Yeah, so not had a need to have a policy. It's not been an issue for us. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that is an issue. I mean, it's not aware of that being an issue in this country with I think maybe some communities here that maybe do have some drug issues would be quite happy about having the drug issue. They'd be kind of like probably in the kind of, cannabis end of the spectrum. We all pretty much gave up that stuff in our early 20s. I tell you now, actually, I would not have been able to have had a clear head to enable me to bring a group of people together to buy a bit of land unless I was sober most of the time. Yeah, if you're planning on setting up a land co-op of some sorts. Yeah, and you have some drug issue. Yeah, get rid of that first, and then everything else will be a plain sailing. Everything else will be a lot easier. Yeah.
So no policy and more like communication based to see and respect each other, and something like that is a good way to go.
Yeah.
Okay. We still have a little bit more time for questions. All right, Lumia, it's up to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi, Wilf. It's been very interesting. You asked about the permaculture principles kind of pertaining to co-ops, and then I immediately thought of, get a yield, no?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it seems to fit quite nicely, and it's been very interesting to hear about your, the money sharing way. And also listening here, I have a question. How would you say your type of co-op would then differ from let's say an eco village?
Yeah, sure. So I think most eco villages are very large. Might be like 100 people. So we're very small. There's only 4 of us, and we've now got children that are fairly grown up. And we also have volunteers, and yeah, so the scale is definitely very different. I think most eco villages that I've encountered quite often have lots of businesses. They might have some organization or company or legal structure that maybe owns the land or oversee some of the kind of common things. But quite often they're too big to have an income sharing, or too big to to have that cooperation amongst everybody. So what I often see is there's micro businesses within that eco village, and some of which might be a co-op of say 2, 3, 4 people. Maybe they're doing the bakery. There's another co-op that's doing the growing vegetables. Lots of examples there. So yeah, and I was very interested in the eco village movement in the 90s, and I really liked that idea of us, potentially, if we'd managed to have 30, 40, 50 people who originally all wanted to be in the Northeast, all wanted to kind of work together and not go to Portugal or not be strictly vegan, then yeah, maybe we would have become an eco village. I would describe us as I think a small holding really is the closest name we would use for ourselves. As I think another thing around eco villages, there can be some degree of isolation, in the sense of, why do you need to talk to somebody outside of the village when everything you need can be provided for within the village? And I think the principal integration rather than segregate comes back to me here, because we definitely wanted to integrate with the local community, villages and the town, cities nearby. And I think always knew that we would only ever be able to grow or produce so much of what we needed ourselves, and wanted to trade. We wanted to sell products and services to the people outside of our small holding, and at the same time for them to trade with us. So, and I feel very integrated with most aspects of the society around us. I mean, obviously thousands of people around us, so obviously not everybody. But yeah, we've got a strong network, around Durham and around the Northeast, and that feels good. I think that adds to the resilience. When we need something or somebody else needs something, we're connected there. My experience of eco villages is that sometimes can not have that. think can be intimidating to people outside. It's kind of like how do I go and visit this place? How do I go and see it? How do I hang out in it? You know, obviously some people will be, and so I'm sure some of them are very well networked with their neighbours. But yeah, if the loaf of bread's being made next door and the vegetables are being grown there and childcare's from that neighbour there, and even your renewable energy might be being installed by your other neighbour, then you know, why would you need to talk to anybody else? Yeah. But yeah, I'm not going to criticize them. I'm sure they're lovely places to live in as well. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I can see there's only one more question. Would you be willing to go for it, and then we would call it? Yeah. All right, Nick, you had your hand raised.
True. Thanks for sharing all the insight. Really marvelous. I think all these small corporations, they add so much resilience, and if done by permaculture design, amazing. Wow. I'm on my way actually to create a co-op at the moment, a design co-op. So we'll see how that goes.
Right. Good luck.
Thank you. Tools, especially about decision making. Are you using consent from sociocracy?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good question. So we are using aspects of sociocracy. It's not being fully used. I'm the only one in the group that has had some training around sociocracy. So there are aspects of it that are useful for us. I think most useful is the process around making a proposal and then turning that into a policy. That's been very useful for us. I think because there's only 4 of us in the group, it's kind of quite hard for us to have, you know, a core group and lots of little working groups that kind of, we're too small for that kind of thing. We do at the same time have roles and responsibilities, which are quite clear, and we do have degrees of delegation. So I look after the accounts for the company, and I can make decisions around that up to a certain point. And then I kind of know, it's like, oh, this looks like a policy change here. I better take this to everybody else at the next meeting and kind of say, I need to change something around how I'm doing the accounts. Or equally the other way around. Somebody might say to me, could you do that with the account so that we have that information? So yeah, it's a lot of our decision making is around consensus and consent. So it's and that, yeah, that can be tricky at times, and at the same time can work very well. I think that's an area that I'd like to see develop in our co-op over the next few years, is just fine-tuning some of that. Our history is definitely around using consensus and trying to work out together what is the best decision. An example today, we're going to build a pizza oven, and we had like a 10-minute conversation walking around an area going, where will it be? And just together, just kind of going here and just looking at like the pros and cons, pluses and minuses of like why there. Okay, maybe we'll often like take our time with decisions. I think that's kind of that works very well as a co-op. If we're not under pressure around something, if the consensus isn't there, then we'll carry on. We'll come back to it at the next meeting or a future meeting, and until either somebody has made a compromise or somebody's come up with a better idea. Some of those aspects of sociocracy I really like is the time-bound nature of a decision. I love that bit of sociocracy. So you make a decision, but you kind of go, this is just for 3 months or just for 6 months. And we book it into the minutes of the meeting, you know, just like come back and have a look at this in 6 months' time. We made a decision around that just yesterday at our meeting. So we're changing our wages just a little bit, and it's like, that's good enough for 6 months. Let's look at it again in 6 months' time. How the finances then? Do we need to put the wages down, or can they go back up or stay the same? So yeah, I think my favorite bit of sociocracy is this sense that that decision is not for life. That decision is, it's good enough for now.
Yeah, safe enough to try.
And so that aspect of consent, I love that. Yeah. I'm part of the Permaculture Association in the UK, and we have a diploma working group, and very lucky to have one of the members of that group as a sociocracy trainer. So every time we have our meetings, which is once a month, we get a quick 5-10 minutes of sociocracy training that's relevant to the meeting and the process. So
oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to have that.
Yeah, I mean, we also use non-violent communication as well. My partner is trained in that. Part of my background is doing community development work, and I was trained as a facilitator. Community facilitator and decision making was a key part of that. So yeah, we've all kind of brought various tools in at various points to kind of help us, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it's accepted as a process. One of the hardest things is if an individual goes away and gets training, goes, hey, I've found this great new thing that's going to help us, and it's like, is this going to get accepted by the group? You know, that's, yeah. So that's like with the sociocracy, it's like parts of it are accepted, other parts are like, oh, not sure about that bit of it. Okay, well, I'll tell you about it again in a year's time. Maybe you'll like it then, you know. So.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah,
All
if
right.
anybody's not familiar with sociocracy, definitely recommend go look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, we switched in the Finnish Permaculture Association in 2019 to sociocracy, and we're slowly using it and getting people integrated with it. It's quite a heavy book to learn, but it is worth it. It is worth it. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Will, for today. This was very interesting and a lot of information. I'm sure everybody kind of had a little bit for their own taste. They can have a look at your website if they feel like they want to know more and reach out to you as well, which I have linked earlier. Thank you again for this day. Wish you a good evening.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me along. And yeah, good luck with whatever cooperative adventures any of you might have.
Thank you. Thank you. As for our members, I will link right now the feedback link. You are welcome to go there and write down what you have felt like, how it was. Please go ahead. Eventually, if you want to hold yourself a lecture, you can reach us. If we have another series after this one, I will post the other link right away. If you wish to be part of this, go there. We will have also next week, Thursday, same time, if I understand properly, with Tony Björneskov, which is one of Luby McMahon's student in her cultural emergency education program. It's going to be a social permaculture Q&A in English. Dominic will be the host, and so